0 to 47 local time. Southern Ukraine, undisclosed launch site. The sapper has worked with this system for over a year. He has fired it more times than he is allowed to count. He still describes the same moment the same way every time. When the booster roars, the ground disappears from under your feet. 6 rails, 6 missiles. They go up in sequence for 20 seconds between each launch, climbing on a column of orange flame and then bending east toward the border. The crew does not stay to watch. The trailers are already moving. The launch site cannot remain in one place for more than a few minutes. Russian counter-battery fire is the only certainty in this war. The missiles are tracking a target 800 kilometers inside Russia. Each one carries a warhead heavier than anything the United States has ever sold to Ukraine. Each one cost less than a third of what the Pentagon pays for a single Tomahawk. Each one was built in a country that did not have a long-range cruise missile program 3 years ago, and the people who built it are not who you think. 11:30 local time. Kotluban Ammunition Depot, Volgograd Oblast. Governor Andrei Bokharov posts a message on his official channel. A series of powerful explosions. Precautionary evacuations. The depot belongs to the main missile and artillery directorate of the Russian Armed Forces. It is one of the largest pre-positioned munition stocks for the Southern Front. It is now on fire. Russian state media does not name the weapon that hit it. They do not need to. Every analyst monitoring the war knows what just happened. A Ukrainian cruise missile flew approximately 1,000 kilometers at 15 meters above the ground, defeated multiple layers of S-300 and S-400 air defense, and put a 1,150-kilogram warhead through the roof of a Russian ammunition depot. The missile is called the FP-5 Flamingo. It was not built by a state arms manufacturer. It was not designed by a defense ministry program. It was built by friends. What that sentence means, and why Russia cannot stop what it has set in motion, is the entire story. The weapon the world was not expecting. To understand why the Flamingo is the most important weapon Ukraine has put into the field since the war began, you have to understand what it replaces. For 3 years, every long-range strike Ukraine has wanted to make against a target deep inside Russia has required a phone call to Washington, London, or Berlin. The ATACMS missile, American. The Storm Shadow, British. The Scalp, French. Every one of these systems came with a paper trail of political conditions attached. Use them on this target, not that one. Stay below this latitude. Do not strike inside undisputed Russian territory. The conditions changed week to week depending on which Western capital was nervous about escalation that day. Ukraine fought a war with weapons it did not own. Then Firepoint happened. Firepoint is a Ukrainian defense startup, founded after the February 2022 full-scale invasion. The founders did not come from the military-industrial sector. They came from construction, from game design, from architecture. They watched their country attacked, looked at what their country needed, and started building. Irina Turek runs the company. Yehor Skaliha is the technical director. Denis Steilerman is the chief designer and co-owner. Together with a team that grew faster than any traditional defense program could match, they did something the established arms industry of every NATO member state has not done in a generation. They built a long-range cruise missile from scratch, in under 3 years, cheaper than anything in the Western inventory, with a heavier warhead and double the range of the Tomahawk. On August 17, 2025, photojournalist Ephraim Lukatsky published the first public images of the missile during a test launch at a hidden facility in southern Ukraine. The Associated Press carried the images worldwide. 3 days later, President Zelensky confirmed serial production had begun. That was the moment the calculation changed. The Flamingo carries a 1,150-kilogram warhead. The American Tomahawk Block 5 carries approximately 450 kilograms. The Flamingo's warhead is 2.5 times heavier than the most advanced cruise missile in the United States Navy's inventory. The claimed range is 3,000 kilometers. The Tomahawk Block 5 flies approximately 1,500. The Flamingo on paper flies twice as far. Per unit, a Flamingo costs an estimated $500,000 to €1 million. A Tomahawk costs between $1.5 and $2.5 million. Ukraine is building a more powerful missile with longer range for a third of the price. Per Firepoint spokesperson Irina Terek, the company purposefully aimed for low cost. The doctrine was not built around precision strikes by a small number of missiles. It was built around volume. Build cheap enough that you can fire many. Fire enough that some always get through. Make the air defense math unwinnable for the other side. That is the doctrine the Flamingo was designed for, and it is working. Why Russian radar cannot see it. The title of this video says the Flamingo does not show up on Russian radar. That is a half-truth. The full truth is more dangerous. Russia has S-300 and S-400 air defense systems deployed across the entire western and southern frontier. These are not obsolete platforms. The S-400 is one of the most capable long-range surface-to-air missile systems on the planet. It has tracked and engaged everything Ukraine has fired at Russian airspace for 3 years. So how does the Flamingo get through? 3 reasons. They have to be understood together. First, altitude. Per Wikipedia and Defense Express analysis, the Flamingo is designed to fly at 15 to 30 meters above the ground. That is not a typo. 15 meters, below the height of most apartment buildings, below the radar horizon of every fixed position S-400 battery in western Russia. A radar antenna sweeping the horizon at 200 kilometers range cannot see what is flying 10 meters above a tree line. The Earth itself is the cover. There is a caveat. Ukraine does not yet have detailed enough terrain mapping of the entire western Russian airspace to fly the missile at its lowest possible altitude across the full route. As terrain mapping improves, the operational altitude can be pushed lower. The Flamingo flies low now. It will fly lower. Second, the antenna. Per Wikipedia, the Flamingo uses a controlled reception pattern antenna for its satellite navigation. Russia jams GPS aggressively across the entire front. Standard satellite-guided weapons drift off course. The Flamingo's antenna is designed to filter the jamming signal out and lock onto the satellite signal underneath, comparable to Russia's own Kometa M system. Claimed accuracy of 14 meters at any range under ideal conditions. Third, the body. The Flamingo's fuselage is monocoque construction produced through fiberglass winding. That is a complex composite manufacturing process, and it is a small radar return when paired with low-altitude flight. The missile is not stealth in the F-22 sense. It is stealth in the sense that everything stacks. Low altitude, low cross-section, jamming-resistant guidance, volume of fire. Russia cannot stop one Flamingo. Russia can stop several Flamingos in a salvo. Russia cannot stop the salvo Ukraine intends to fire next month. That is the doctrine. And on November 2025, when the first Flamingo strikes began landing inside Russian-occupied territories, the doctrine was confirmed. By February 8, 2026, the Ukrainian General Staff was reporting Flamingo strikes on the Kapustin Yar test range, the facility from which Russia launches the Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missile, the same range where Russia tests the weapons it threatens NATO with. 4 days later, on February 12th, the depot at Kotluban exploded. 3 weeks after that, the missiles were flying further. The strikes that changed the war. The targets the Flamingo is reaching are not symbolic, they are doctrine critical. The Kapustin Yar test range is in Astrakhan Oblast, over 600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. It is where Russia tests its newest missile systems. Hitting Kapustin Yar is hitting the place where Russia's next generation of weapons is supposed to be born. The Kotluban depot near Volgograd was holding artillery and missile munitions intended for the southern front. When it went up, Governor Bosharov reported a series of powerful explosions and ordered evacuations. Russian state media tried to attribute the fire to a technical incident. The Cyberbaroshno OSINT community published satellite imagery within 48 hours showing impact craters consistent with cruise missile strikes. But the strike that mattered most came on February 20th and February 21st, 2026. The target was the JSC Votkinsk machine building plant, 1,400 kilometers inside Russia, deep inside the Udmurt Republic. The plant has been producing ballistic missiles continuously since 1957. It is the manufacturing facility for the Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile, the weapon Russia uses to strike Ukrainian cities, hospitals, and apartment blocks. It also produces engines for the Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missile, the system Russia tested against Dnipro in November 2024. Cyberboroshno OSINT analysts confirmed the strike. The production workshops were hit. The factory that builds the missiles Russia fires at Ukrainian children was struck by a missile built by a Ukrainian startup founded by friends from construction sites and game studios. A single strike does not stop production at a facility that size. Defense Express was clear about this. The destruction of an industrial complex on the scale of Votkinsk requires sustained, repeated strikes. One Flamingo salvo will not end the Iskander program, but it has changed the calculation forever. The factory is no longer untouchable. The arsenal that fuels Russia's strategic strike capacity is now within Ukrainian range. And within Ukrainian range means within Ukrainian doctrine. Russia has to defend it. Russia has to decommission air defense batteries from other parts of the front to defend it. Russia has to reroute production to facilities that are easier to hit elsewhere. Every option costs Russia something. That is what asymmetric volume warfare looks like when it is working. In March 2026, the Flamingo flew further again, striking the JSC Promsyntez explosives plant in Chapayevsk in Samara Oblast, at least 1,000 kilometers from the launch point. The plant produces military explosives. It supplies the propellant that fills Russian artillery shells. Without propellant, there is no shelling. Without shelling, the Russian advance on the Donetsk axis stalls within 48 hours. The supply chain itself is now the target, not the soldiers at the front, not the launchers at the border. The buildings that make the war possible, 1,400 kilometers deep inside Russian territory, in regions that until this year had never heard an air raid siren. Per Defense Express analysis, the Flamingo's warhead appears to be an off-the-shelf US-supplied aerial bomb, possibly a 2,000-pound Mark 84 high explosive, or a BLU-109 bunker buster capable of penetrating up to 6 feet of reinforced concrete. The implication is straightforward. The hardened roofs over Russian production halls were not designed for what is now flying at them. The bunkers built during the Cold War to survive American air attack were never engineered to defeat a weapon that did not exist 3 years ago. Every strike has changed something. The strike on Kapustin Yar told Russia that its newest weapons could be hit at the test range before they were ever fielded. The strike on Kotluban told Russia that the Southern Front's munition stocks were no longer safe. The strike on Votkinsk told Russia that the production line itself was inside the envelope. The strike on Chapayevsk told Russia that the propellant supply chain was reachable. 4 targets, 4 messages, each one delivered by a missile costing less than the price of an armored personnel carrier. Most weapons in this war were sent by allies. The Flamingo was not. The missile that hit Votkinsk was designed by a man whose previous job was architecture, built in a factory that did not exist 3 years ago, programmed by engineers who learned the craft on civilian software, funded in part by a country that decided cruise missiles should not require a phone call to Washington before they fly. Irina Terek, Firepoint CEO, was not a defense executive before this war. Yehor Skaliha, technical director, did not come from a state arms bureau. Dennis Steilerman, chief designer and co-owner, built the missile that hit the most important Russian missile factory of the 21st century, a startup with 3 years of history. Hit the plant that has been building Russia's ballistic missiles since the year Sputnik was launched. Russia spent 70 years building the Votkinsk machine-building plant into the cornerstone of its missile industry. Ukraine spent 3 years building the company that put a warhead through the roof of it. Think about what that means for the calculation in Moscow. The institutional defense industry of the Russian Federation, every research bureau, every state contractor, every closed military city could not produce a missile fast enough to hit a startup that did not exist when the war started. The startup hit them first, with a weapon they did not predict on a target they thought was safe. In a year they thought they had under control. Russia struck back. On February 15, 2026, Zelensky confirmed at a press conference that Russia had hit a Flamingo production line with a missile strike. He confirmed it openly because by the time he was speaking, production had already been relocated. The line was partially restored. The disruption did not stop the campaign. That is the part Russia did not plan for. You can strike a state defense contractor and you set its program back by a year. You strike a startup that has been operating in wartime for 3 years and they move production overnight. They scatter the line across multiple sites. They restart inside a week. The agility of the manufacturer is the weapon. Per Firepoint statements, daily production stood at 3 Flamingos per day in mid-March 2026. The target is 210 missiles per month. New engines are close to completion to replace the current AI-25 power plant. A subsidiary in Denmark is producing solid rocket fuel for the missile from a NATO country. Russia is in a race. It cannot strike every Flamingo factory. It cannot intercept every Flamingo in flight. It cannot defend every target the Flamingo can reach. The math does not work for Russia, and every month the math gets worse. The cost and what comes next. The honest version of this story includes the cost. The Flamingo's claimed 3,000-kilometer range has not been demonstrated against a target at full distance. The longest confirmed strike to date is approximately 1,400 kilometers. The full claimed envelope is theoretical until tested. Russian air defenses have intercepted Flamingos multiple times. Zelensky himself acknowledged in late 2025 that some salvos have been partially shot down. The doctrine assumes interception. The doctrine answers it with volume, but the volume is not yet at full scale. 3 Flamingos per day is not 210 per month. Until production reaches doctrinal capacity, the air defense math still favors Russia on individual engagements. The Flamingo wins only when there are enough of them in the air at once that Russia cannot engage them all. That is the race Ukraine is running. Russia knows it. The February strike on the Flamingo production line was the proof. Russia is trying to attack the factory before the missile reaches scale. Ukraine is trying to reach scale before Russia can attack the factory. It is the most consequential industrial race of the war. If Ukraine wins it, if Firepoint reaches 210 missiles per month, the entire European part of Russia falls within strike range. The strategic depth Russia has relied on for centuries disappears. Every defense factory, every airbase, every ammunition depot from St. Petersburg to Novosibirsk, all of it inside the envelope of a missile that costs less than a luxury apartment. The implications go beyond this war. For 70 years, the global arms industry has operated on a single assumption, that long-range precision strike was the exclusive domain of major powers with deep defense budgets. That assumption has just been falsified by a startup founded by friends from non-military backgrounds in a country at war. Every contested state on the planet, Taiwan, the Baltic nations, South Korea, is studying the Firepoint model right now. The lesson is unambiguous. The barrier to entry for strategic strike capability is no longer a state arms ministry. It is a war and the will to build. There is a forward threat. Russia is not standing still. Russian military planners are studying the Flamingo strikes the same way Ukrainian planners studied Russian missile attacks for the last 3 years. The next layer of S-400 deployments is already shifting toward the new threat axis. Mobile air defense regiments that were defending Moscow are repositioning along the routes the Flamingo has flown. The race is not just industrial, it is doctrinal. If Firepoint cannot scale fast enough, Russia adapts and the window closes. If Firepoint scales first, the window stays open and the targets keep falling. There is no third outcome. The factory that built the missiles raining on Ukrainian cities was hit. The startup that hit it is still operating. The next salvo is being assembled while you watch this video. Russia built a missile to destroy Ukraine. Ukraine built a missile to destroy the factory making it. The factory has been hit.